Good morning. I'm Joel Miller. I'm the interim minister here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. So glad to welcome you to our virtual service. I'm sorry we had to cancel our in-person services this morning because of the weather. Some years ago, a member of the church I was serving asked to meet with me. This member was very good at business, and he and his wife had asked me to be the minister at their wedding when they had gotten married a year before. When he came to see me, their first baby had just been born. He explained he was worried. "Joel," he said, "I'm a humanist. I don't believe in gods or a god. I believe in science. But right now I wish I could be religious. I want to be happy about our baby." I immediately started remembering my own time in Sunday school. I grew up in a Unitarian Universalist church. I was very much a humanist kid. I remembered loving Sunday school. And we lit a flaming chalice in Sunday school. Lit a flame, a candle. Symbol of Unitarian Universalism was important to me. I loved my friends, and I loved the adults, my Sunday school teachers, the minister. These were important people in my life, and Sunday school was great. Lighting a flaming chalice was a symbol of all of that experience for me. But I was confused about one thing, because there were some adults in my church that said lighting a flaming chalice would make us religious. And if we became religious, we would become stupid. Now, these were people I loved and people who loved me. So it was confusing to me, because when they said lighting a chalice would make us stupid, it felt mean. It didn't feel right. So one Sunday, I asked our director of religious education if lighting a flaming chalice would make us stupid. She asked me a question in return. "Joel, what do you think?" Well, all my friends at Sunday school were looking at me, and I wasn't sure what to do, what to say, because I had a secret. But, I felt really good about being at Sunday school, and so I trusted them, and I told them my secret. I made myself a chalice so I could have one at home. I have it next to my bed. It makes me happy. One of the girls in my class, Liz, she was very smart and very funny. And she smiled at me and she said, "Well, I don't think that's stupid. I want my own chalice too." So I told this story to the businessman with the newborn baby. And then I said to him, "I don't think it's bad to feel happy, to feel joyful. It's good to feel joy, especially about a baby."
Welcome, friends, new and old. Welcome to our shared journey of the Spirit. We are grateful that you are here with us online this morning. We hope that you are warm and cozy on this wonderfully winter morning. I am Director of Religious Education, Nick Walwork, here at the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are a spiritual community that appreciates the importance of each of our spiritual journeys. Each of us is on a spiritual journey, one that begins at our birth and continues through childhood, youth, adulthood, and elderhood. That is why we cherish community. We are all in need of one another as we find our way. No matter how old or young we are stronger and freer when we depend on each other as we grow and change. We know that the babies among us will someday be our teachers, or our activists for justice, or caring for us when we hurt and are healing, or singing or speaking to raise our spirits, and we cherish our elders who have built and nurtured the spiritual home for us. Their wisdom shared with us can be a guiding light that we need through tough times. If you have children or youth or family and have questions about our religious education programming, I am pleased to talk with you and answer all your questions about it. You can find my information, contact information on our website, along with any of our other staff. If you have questions about singing in our choir or playing in our services, please contact our music director, Michael Rosen. Our AV technical director is Alex West, who put all of this together at last minute, and we thank him for that. And our congregational administrator, Katie Julik, is here most weekdays and happy to get your emails. And Reverend Joel Miller, who is leading our service today, is our interim minister. For a complete listing of all of our events, those can also be found at our website, muuf.org/calendar. A couple of quick announcements I have for you this morning. The youth bowling event for ages 13 through 17 will not happen today because of the snow, but will be postponed to next week. Look out for information about that coming out in the next couple of days. Also, the endowment process, grant process has begun. So if you have an idea for the fellowship that'll benefit the fellowship, can be a physical improvement or a program or something like that that needs to be installed, we would love to hear from you. The amount allocated for the round of grants is close to $18,000, so there's a possibility that we can get a couple of projects funded. The endowment committee will be in the Great Hall following all services in January to answer questions on the grant proposal process and to distribute the proposal forms. The January in-person session of mindfulness meditation will be on January 14th at 11:45 in the meditation room on the 3rd floor. Beginners and longtime practitioners alike are welcome to join us. Thank you for being here today. We're excited to be with you.
If you have a chalice at home, I invite you to find it and have it with you, to light it if you're comfortable. I have my own chalice here at home. And as I light this chalice, I invite us to share the words of this morning's affirmation. Love is the spirit of this fellowship, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Now we are at the point in our service, our time for all ages. And this is a conversation for all ages. but particularly our younger folks. So if you're paying attention or not paying attention, now is the time to pay attention, because I have something to show you, something very exciting. It's a very ancient piece of technology that I think you'll be interested in. I don't know if you've ever seen one of these before. It's very old. Have you seen one of these before? It says New York for New York City, but they have maps for all over the place. It's called a map, a road map, particularly. I don't know if you can see in here. I know you have maps in your schools. I don't know, maybe those are on your smartboard. But you can see in here, it has all sorts of roads. And what you do is you figure out where you were and where you wanted to go, and you find the best route. Maybe you want to go down these roads, and the thicker the roads were, the faster they were, the better they were. These blue ones over here are interstates. And that's how you figure out how to get places. That's how you drive when you're driving. Nowadays, we use GPSs, right? So we have them right in the dashboard of our cars. Sometimes they're on our phones. And they tell us how to get from place. They take all of the mystery out of using a map. Make things very easy. Teach us how to go from one place to another, to the point where I think there are some people, myself included sometimes, who wouldn't know how to get to regular places they go to without the GPS on their car. Today we're going to talk about different kinds of guides, things that can guide us from one place to another, whether that's physically in a car, like with a map, or in other ways. One of the things that I use to guide me, one of the examples I have, is spreadsheets. Now, I make a spreadsheet for everything, not just math, not just budgets, although I do it with that too. When I was recently planning all of the classes that we have coming up, I put all of them in a spreadsheet and figured out who the teachers are and who we didn't have teachers yet for, and what times they would all work together, because it's always a complicated puzzle. But I put it in a spreadsheet, and that guided me in how to plan those things. When I first came to the fellowship, I wanted to figure out how you guys had done religious education in the past. So I gathered a whole bunch of people who have done it before, people who have been teaching for a long, long time. Some people have been teaching for not so long time. Some people haven't taught at all, but were interested in it. We had a couple of meetings, some on Zoom, some in person, and I asked for them to guide me in how to guide them into lead religious education. Sometimes we can read books, and those will guide us in how-tos. We listen to podcasts or watch some YouTube videos. I know I do that when I have little repairs around the house that I need to figure about. There's all sorts of things that can guide us. Maps, people, technology. As you're sitting in your living room right now with your family, I'd like you to just tell them some things that you use to guide you. We'll take a few minutes, turn around and tell them, what are some things that guide you? Okay, hopefully you got it all out and you guys can have conversations about that after the service. Today, we are also talking about the three kings. An important part of the Christian Christmas story is this day called Epiphany, which was celebrated yesterday, 12 days after Jesus is born. Three wise people, sometimes called kings. Some people thought they were philosophers. Some people thought they were astrologers. But we celebrate 12 days after that. That's where the 12 days of Christmas comes from. Epiphany. And we celebrate the three wise men, three wise people, the astronomers, the philosophers coming and meeting Jesus. And what's really interesting about this story is that they were from a far-off land, but they studied the stars. And they saw this one star that looked very interesting to them. It was bigger and brighter. And they said, there must be something with that star. In fact, we think there is something important underneath that star. And so we are going to take off from this far-off land, or to that far-off land there, and we're going to see what's underneath that star. And they go a long ways, and when they finally get to the star, underneath it is the baby Jesus. I'm sure that's not what they were expecting, because they had these gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, important symbolic gifts, but certainly not baby gifts. But they seemed happy that they are there, because they chose to follow that star. We all get to choose what guide stars we have in our lives, what things can guide us, what stars there are. We can choose physical things like maps, or technology, or people, or attitudes, which Pastor Reverend Joel is going to talk about in a little bit. What things we choose to guide us, right? Sometimes we choose bad things. Sometimes we watch bad news on cable. Sometimes adults will read bad reporting on social media. And so being smart and wise about what we choose to lead us is a really important thing. And so as you young people grow up to be adults, and as adults continue to move on in life, I'd like you to be really intentional and smart and wise about your guiding stars.
This is the time in our service when we note milestones, passages, and gratitudes that have been important to us in the previous week or weeks. This morning, as we note the passages and milestones in the world around us, let us think again of the people in Palestine and in Israel, the violence they are suffering there, and the authoritarian, violent governments that surround them and cause them so much harm. May peace come to them all soon, very soon. A milestone being shared from Debbie Rice. She writes, after some ongoing issues and a recent injury, Steve Rice will be undergoing major spinal surgery on January 10th at Overlook Hospital. 3 months of initial recovery are expected to follow. Please keep us in your good thoughts and prayers. It's a very scary and stressful time for us. We are looking forward to a healthier and happier spring. Paul Snellgrove is having heart surgery tomorrow to remove a stent and for some bypass surgery. For both Steve and for Paul, our wishes for a quick and effective surgery and quick, comfortable healing to follow. And some passages for some of us, including myself, who have COVID. There are a number of us in the congregation who are in quarantine at the moment, and may all of our healing be quick, and may the COVID go away soon. And of course, always a gratitude for this community and for each of you, your presence here, your care and love for yourselves and for each other. It makes a difference in this world. On a Sunday when I'm talking about humanism and talking about folks who don't necessarily believe in a God, or really just don't believe in a God or gods or higher powers, I'd like to offer a prayer, because I think even atheists can pray. It doesn't mean, it has nothing to do with deities or non-corporeal beings or anything like that. It has to do with an orientation of our spirits, of our thinking. Who am I to pray? Who are you to hear this prayer? What am I to be praying with you? And as we pray, what will you choose to be with me and each other? At the moment, I find myself a bit of earth, walking about the earth, snuggled warmly in my home. And I find my questions are my deepest prayers. here for this moment. We journey together in this life. We travel together, stars overhead, earth under our feet. In the spring, there will be flowers close at hand. Perhaps now, ice outside the door. Other beings may be beside us or in the screen, and we'll see them at coffee hour on Zoom after the service. And I wonder, as others suffer, experience pain and loss, I want it to stop for them. I know how hard it is. The loss is terrible. And I'm weary myself. Really, the third time with COVID? Ugh. And this one was really nasty. I refuse to be cranky. I refuse to give up in despair for those who suffer so. I mean, here it is. Here we are. Walking, talking earth. Stardust walking around on rock that goes around the sun. We're like a promised land, talking to one another. Isn't that amazing? We're like a living landscape, meeting other parts of the landscape, having conversation, telling jokes, growing food, bringing new people into the world. We have words and smiles to offer, as real as the milk and honey that blossoms forth from this earth. And you and I, all of us, we look up at the stars. Perhaps we can listen with the ears of our ancestors or watch with the eyes of our great-grandparents, and maybe listen with the thoughts of our great-grandchildren, and imagine the music they might sing as they look at the stars. Something is certain in all of these questions. The certainty is that there is nothing certain. There's nothing hermetically sealed away from our questions. We are star stuff talking to star stuff. And even to be praying, human beings, part of the earth, to each other. We talk, a community. We talk to the land around us, to the earth, to this world. We're already home. Let us be at home with each other in the snow and the ice and the sun and the stars. Let's continue to journey a while longer. Let us walk together as a living promised land. A land and a spirit already surrounding us, if we will let it. Home. Home. So be it. Amen. Blessed be. This poem is entitled, Choose Something Like a Star. The poem is by Robert Frost, and he wrote it in 1947. I've included a link to this poetry and some commentary on it, so you can reread the poem if you like. It's in the online order of service. The poem is written in an old-fashioned way, and it uses lofty words that are large and have very complicated meanings. So let me explain to younger listeners that this poem that Robert Frost writes starts out with Robert Frost, the poet, talking with a star that is important to him. And then at the end of the poem, Robert Frost begins to talk to us, the readers of the poem or the listeners of the poem. And he's telling us what he has learned from the star. O star, the fairest one in sight, we grant your loftiness the right to some obscurity of cloud. It will not say of night, since dark is what brings out your light. Some mystery becomes the proud, but to be wholly taciturn in your reserve is not allowed. Say something to us so we can learn by heart, and when alone, repeat. Say something. And it says, I burn. But say, star, with what degree of heat? Talk, Fahrenheit, centigrade? Use language we can comprehend. Tell us what elements you blend. The star gives us strangely little aid, but does tell us something in the end. Not even stooping from its sphere, it asks a little of us here. It asks of us a certain height. So when at times the mob is swayed to carry praise or blame too far, we may choose something like a star to stay our minds on and be stayed. I grew up going to Unitarian Universalist Sunday school. I didn't believe in a God or in gods. I thought when I was young, when I was a child and a youth, I thought all I needed to learn was science and reason. That is why I called myself a humanist. The word humanism is an ancient one. It has always meant the study of human meaning and human values. How do human beings know the world? How do we decide what is right and wrong? We do that as human beings, and that's what humanism means. 400 years ago, there was a time called the Renaissance, and in those days, humanism was a cultural movement, and humanists were asking religious leaders to be more open to human experience as a source of wisdom and understanding about right and wrong. About 100 years ago, a group of scientists that included Unitarians and Universalists got together, and they all wrote something called the Humanist Manifesto. And these Unitarians, these Universalists, and these scientists were trying in this manifesto to convince the world that everyone should be humanist, that no one should be religious anymore, that religions did more harm than good, and we should think and see the world only using science and reason. I still call myself a humanist, even though now I believe in God. There are some humanists who would say, "Oh, Joel, I'm sorry, you can't be a humanist if you believe in God." But humanism's changed a lot in that last 100 years. Humanism has a lot of people who are theists, like myself, theists who believe in God. But many humanists are atheists. Many humanists don't really care about the entire conversation about gods or goddesses or godlets. It's just not important to them. Some humanists are Wiccans or pagans. Many are feminists. Some are Muslims. Some are Jews. Some are Christians. And many are Unitarian Universalists. The businessman who came and talked to me many years ago at the church where I was then serving, he wanted to be happy about his newborn baby. And he told me he was a humanist. He was also a Unitarian Universalist. He was struggling because to feel joy wasn't logical, it wasn't scientific, and he didn't know what to do about that. My advice to him was to let himself fall into joy. I recently found an excellent definition of dignity in a book by Greg Epstein. Greg Epstein is the president of the Chaplains Association at Harvard University. So he's sort of the head organizer of chaplains and religious activities at Harvard. It's already very interesting to me because Greg Epstein is very much a humanist. He's a Jewish humanist. But he's also, working as a religious person. He has this wonderful book. It's called Good Without God. And he wonders in the book how quick so many Americans are to discriminate against people who are not theists or who describe themselves as not religious. I really like Epstein's book. He writes well. He writes with good, solid understanding of science and reason. But I do have a bit of a disagreement with Greg Epstein because he presumes that humanists and people who are not theists are not religious. And you know those humanists I grew up with, I talked about at the beginning of the service, the people who were worried about my lighting a chalice. When I was a kid, the most religious people I knew were those people. Even though they didn't think of themselves as religious, they were the most religious people I knew of. It was important to them to be honest, to be loving, to do the right thing. And there was no one threatening them with a hell or a damnation or gifts and nice new fancy cars because they did the right thing. They only did it because they believed in it. They seemed very religious to me. They still do. So I'll say that Greg Epstein is also, to me, a very religious person, a deeply spiritual person. I hope he will forgive me for saying that. He reminds me of my Sunday school teachers. He's so human. He's so humanist. He's humble. He's thoughtful. He's vulnerable and dignified. His book, Good Without God, is a treasure on my bookshelf. I recommend it to you. For him, dignity is an important thing to write about. For him, the source of goodness in human beings is our dignity. Now that's very interesting because the first principle of Unitarian Universalism is to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people. But he's not saying we all automatically have dignity. It's something inherent to our being. But it's something we have to do, not something we have. Epstein describes it as a way of relating to other people. Dignity is to be aware of each other, to care for each other, to see or listen to each other as we really are, and to become more deeply connected to each other. He's describing the first principle of Unitarian Universalism. I don't think on purpose, but it's very interesting that we and he are so similar that way. The other thing that he says is so important is that we're all in this together. We're all interconnected in a web of existence. And that's our seventh principle as Unitarian Universalists. Epstein has this most humane humanism. He doesn't really spend a lot of time talking about whether there is or there isn't a God. He just says, I really don't care that much. But he does say, it's possible to be good without having belief in a God. And as he describes how it is to be a good person and be human, he reminds us of the original meaning of the word human. It comes from the ancient Latin word humus. And we have all these other similar words to human. Human, humble, humus, humility, humiliate, humane. All these hue-sounding words come from the sense that we are living earth. I'm very happy to tell you all, you're a bunch of dirt. And so am I. We're just earthlings, one of many living forms of earth. Humanism is a cherishing of our humanity, an encouragement to be humble, to not think we're the stars in the sky, but to just care for one another and love one another. And this is the kind of dignity that Greg Epstein's talking about. To practice it, by practicing dignity, seeing it and caring for it in others and in ourselves. Something we do rather than something we have. What's important then in being connected to each other, seeing each other in our dignity, seeing the world in its dignity? It's something that Epstein talks about as he was trying to write his book. He was trying to talk about how happy it made him to be a humanist and to see the world and enjoy the world. And every time he kept trying to write about it, he realized that the joy was going out of his words. And he remembered the words of another poet, a fellow named William Blake, a centuries-old warning about the perils of always being in control. William Blake wrote, "He who bends to himself a joy doth the winged life destroy. But he who kisses joy as it flies lives in eternity's sunrise." Epstein writes about the moment he realized the poet's warning. If you try to grab the joy and make it what you want to make out of it, the joy is gone. Nothing lives when it's bent out of its own dignity to what we want out of it. Joy begins with an awareness of what's happening in the lives of others, other beings, other people, and the earth. Epstein is humble enough, human enough, humane enough, that he allows himself to fall into joy, and his awareness to be open enough that joy can fall into his life. Another example of this, falling into joy, is an American Buddhist nun, Pema Chodron. She's the author of several books. She teaches at an abbey in Nova Scotia, a Tibetan Buddhist monastery. She tells a story in her book, The Places That Scare You, a guide to fearlessness in difficult times. She tells a story about being open to joy. Once there was a cook at the abbey. The cook was feeling very unhappy. Like most of us, she kept feeding the gloom of her feelings with her actions and her thinking, and she got gloomier and sadder and angrier. She decided to try to ventilate her escalating emotions by baking chocolate chip cookies. Her plan backfired. She burned them to a crisp. At that point, rather than dump the burned cookies in the garbage, she stuffed them into her pockets and went out for a walk. She walked along the dirt road, her head hanging down. Her mind burned with anger, with resentment. She was saying to herself, "So where's all the beauty and magic in life? I keep hearing about it." At that moment, she looked up. There, walking toward her on the road, was a little fox. Her mind stopped. She held her breath and watched. The fox sat down right in front of her. She reached into her pockets and pulled out some of the cookies. The fox ate them and then slowly trotted away. When she came back, she told us all at the Abbey what happened. She said, "I learned today life is very precious. Even when we're determined to block its joy, it will get through and wake us up. That little fox taught me, no matter how shut down we get, we can always look outside and connect with joy." I had a moment like that. That moment when I began to understand how important it is to let joy happen, to be open to it. I was home with my first child many years ago. I was the at-home parent of a little baby boy. I remember reading books, we had nap time, singing songs, sometimes going for walks. It was amazing to see my little boy discovering the world. One beautiful sunny morning, he was sitting on a beautiful red blanket in the living room. It was a beautiful red blanket that his uncle had given to him. My baby was happy. It was comfortable. We'd been out for a fun walk. He wasn't tired yet. And he was enjoying being in the sun. And I watched him, and suddenly he gazed at the color of the blanket he was sitting on. He looked at it, and he looked at it very closely again. And then he smiled. And then he looked up at me. Red, I said. The color is red. He looked at it again, the beautiful red color of the blanket. He touched it. Did red feel like anything? That moment in time is burned in my memory. My child was becoming conscious of color, becoming awake to the quiet joy of seeing redness. And then there was green, and then there was blue and orange, all the other colors. Epstein's idea of humanist dignity could be a good tool for our Unitarian Universalism. How to live our first principle. It may seem obvious we want to affirm the dignity of other people, but the principle, if it were a star, could feel pretty far away. Sometimes some people don't seem to have very much dignity. And sometimes it's hard for us, when we're not feeling well, to be open to dignity, others' dignity, and joy even. But dignity in Epstein's humanism is not a predetermined state. It's something we do. It's an openness to who others are, to how they live, an openness to their openness, even. It's an open door in the soul, the care given to a child in our arms. Someday, a child who will see our faces rejoicing, see us falling into joy, and learning them, they too can fall into joy, as we are all meant to fall. It's one reason that we are now together with each other here online, and most Sundays in person together, if we're able to. Because to experience joy, we need each other. It's a depth of connection, like a moment in nature, looking at the stars, a moment with a child discovering red, a moment when holding a newborn baby and realizing how wonderful it is to be alive. Let us be open to falling into joy and realize there is nothing that will ever quench the star fire that burns in us. Before we close our service, I just want to invite you again to our coffee hour that follows this service on Zoom. Go now and let our lives be lived prayers, prayers that water dry souls, that mend broken hearts, that refuse to be terrorized, that seek this world's beauties, prayers that carry us all through all the storms. Go now, the world needs us as living prayers.